Where's your microphone? Could you actually move it a little bit closer? Because you're kind of quiet.
Sure. Yeah, I have a big old microphone right right below me here. So
I
I just
got this
wanted to,
one on an arm, so I can like
yeah,
twist it
yeah.
around.
Should I just bring it up into the frame, maybe?
Oh yeah, yeah, it's
Just
totally fine.
okay. All right.
It hides your pretty shirt though. Like, oh no.
I know. I know. It's like my nice, pretty shirt. All right. I think that'll work. Cool.
All right, just looks like we're live. I'm going to ask the audience, how is the sound? It's my
Can they hear me? Okay.
Yep, that's my new ritual is that I start it, wait for the people to show up and say sound, and then like yes, good or no, bad. All right, looks like we're good. So, Dr.
Cool.
Kenny Rhodes, thank you for coming on and being willing to have a conversation with me. I really appreciate it. Would you mind telling us a little bit about yourself before we get started?
Just call me Kenny. And I mean that sincerely. I'm not impressed with myself. The more you learn, the more you really realize how much you don't know. And it took me till I hit 40 until I realized I just don't know as much as I think I know. But anyway, let's see. I was on my way to a music career, and the Lord abruptly stopped that plan. So it was at 19 that I surrendered to the ministry, and from there became a youth pastor, worship pastor, stuff like that. Started going to school and realized that if I was going to be a pastor, I should know what I'm talking about. And so I had a real passion for studying, research, academics, and things of that nature. And so really I spent the next 15, 16 years in school. And I happened to be back in school again, but I'm working on another doctorate with Liberty University. And then I just started working for Southeastern University as an adjunct professor as well. So that's the professional kind of stuff. I also am affiliated with Reasons to Believe. So we like to reach out to the STEM-minded folks. And so we enjoy dialoguing and honestly talking about the issues with people. And so I wrote a couple books a handful of years ago. And I love working with Reasons to Believe. Done a lot of video stuff with them that's on YouTube. It's on their channel. And personally, I have my lovely wife of 25 years, almost 26 years. And we have 3 kids, 2 girls and a boy. The boy's the baby, and he is 20, soon to be 21. Soon to be 21. Yeah, and the oldest is just about 24. So it's been a fast, long life growing these kids up. And so being fairly young, I haven't hit 50 yet, but now that the kids are grown and young adults, it's kind of nice to be able to still have the energy to run around with my wife. And so we just got back from Santa Cruz and stuff. And so we're enjoying being a little younger and having adult children. Some of my friends, they're going to be 60 when their kids are adults. So I don't know how they're taking care of young babies now. So with you have any kids? You married?
Nope. I'm currently single, working on relationships as a part of my social life right now, but mostly just trying to build my YouTube channel, kind of get a stable career going.
Cool. Yeah. I see a couple guitars back there. Is that a Telecaster?
Yeah. No, that
Yeah.
one's a Fender Bullet. The Telecaster was a different model, so that one's actually an older one than the Telecaster, more classic.
Okay. Looked like the headstock was Telecaster
The
from
Telecaster actually
back
has like a
here.
little it's the same headstock but a different bass because the
Yeah.
Telecaster has like a big round bass, kind of like the acoustic ones, but the Bullet has the sharper like little horn thing that comes out of it like the more newer ones that aren't the Telecaster.
Oh yeah, I think I've seen those before. I'm a huge, even though I'm a drummer by profession, because I still teach music. Um, I'm a huge guitar, so I watch a lot of guitar players, and so John Five is probably one of the newest guitar gods that I just love. He's amazing. A lot of these guys are playing Telecasters, you know.
I like Steve Vai is one of my favorites.
Oh, I've got everything Steve Vai ever recorded. Just amazing.
Yep.
Yeah, I love Steve Vai.
His
I
his
love him.
solo from the TV series, the movie, The Crossroads. That one's one of my favorites. And
Oh
his,
yeah, yeah.
did you have the one from the Halo soundtrack, the modular mix?
I haven't heard that.
Oh, you don't have all of the ones he did then. You're
I guess
missing
I
one.
get. I guess I don't. So is that a video game
Yep, he
that he
did the
did the soundtrack?
soundtrack.
Yeah.
He did the soundtrack for the Halo video game, and it's called the
Right.
modular mix. It was composed by someone else, but he did all of the guitar work for it.
Oh, cool. I'm sure my son has that game.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's awesome. And I like Steve Vai way more than Satriani. You
yeah,
know, Satriani's great. I really do like him. But Steve is just, on that other level of weirdness, creativity that I really like. You know, he seems to be uh, very thoughtful as well, the way he approaches music and life and philosophy and things like that. I get a kick out of just, like a Gravity Storm, just the way he tries to, implement science type notions and see what that would translate into music.
yeah.
He's just brilliant. I really love Steve Vai. Of course, Eddie Van Halen's my all time favorite.
I'm not a big fan actually. I like Steve Vai a lot more, and I'm kind of a fan of Yngwie Malmsteen. I love his technical skills are amazing. I love listening to classical music on electric guitar. That's just the greatest thing ever. But my
Uh,
favorite guitarists are the YouTube guitarists. Like Dr. Vossi is amazing. He is the greatest ever because his rendition of like Paganini and the
yeah,
Toccata and Fugue are just the greatest things I've ever heard. And I want to learn how to play those more than anything.
yeah. Have you listened to Jason Becker at all?
Yep, I have heard some of his.
Yeah, yeah. He's just I guess a couple hours away from me over in the Bay Area.
Oh yeah.
I'm in California. Man, horrible. Just I remember when he got sick and he had just recorded. Uh, Gosh, what was the album with David Lee Roth? Because I followed David Lee Roth after he left Van Halen because Steve Vai was introduced at that point to the world. But anyway, it was a great album, and then for him to just his career just to be stopped like that, just horrible, horrible, horrible. Man, I wish they could find a cure to that stuff.
Yeah.
What a great talent.
Oh,
But
same
he
with
has
What
composed.
is his name? Marty McFly, the actor who played in Back to the Future, because he
Uh huh.
actually he did the guitar solos and he had what was it, ALS or something, and he
Mm.
and he stopped being able to play guitar, but he was really good too.
Oh, I didn't know that. Hmm.
Yeah, he actually played the guitar in the movie that was because there's that one guitar scene where he's like playing
Oh
for his
yeah,
parents. He was actually the
yeah.
one playing that in that scene.
Oh, oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Huh.
But he got
Fascinating.
Parkinson's or ALS or something, and now he can't do it as much. Michael J. Fox. Thank you, Theo said.
Yeah. Oh, Michael J. Okay, yeah. Oh yeah, Michael J. He actually, yeah, I knew he played guitar. Yeah, yeah. That's horrible. Yeah, he got Parkinson's, right?
Yep.
Yeah, yeah. Horrible, horrible, horrible. So, what other music genres you like?
I'm big into instrumentals, so I like usually just electric guitar and just the music. I'm not big into words. So most of the stuff I listen to are just things I find on YouTube that you've never heard before and that are like
Yeah.
you don't know who the author is. It just says like track one and it's some niche thing with no views on YouTube, but it's the greatest guitar solo I've ever heard in my entire life, and I find tons of those all over the place, and those are the kinds of things I listen to.
Yeah, I do a lot of perusing YouTube just to find guitar players. Yeah, love to find some of these guys down in Brazil that are just like crazy good.
Oh yeah, he's the
And then
that
these
guy.
12-year-old
I think I
these
know exactly who you're
12-year-old
talking about.
Japanese girls too, they're
Yeah,
really good.
yeah, yeah.
Just amazing. Amazing. But it sounds like we have a lot in common in the music area, because I've always been an instrumentalist, and that's what I did. Well, about 1988, I lost my drive to be a rock star because somebody introduced me to jazz, and I went a totally different direction, and so. But that, I was going places in the jazz fusion world as well. But yeah, I've never cared too much to work with singers, and I've just loved writing instrumental music and stuff. So it was a lot of fun back in the day. I've done a few albums, nobody famous or anything like that, but I've done some stuff like that. So, but yeah, so we got a lot in common there.
Yeah. You just go the jazz route, and I go more of the classical route.
Yeah, I go more to the jazz funk uh, area, where you've got fusion, literally, where you fuse the Latin, Cuban rhythms into funk and swing, things like that. And there's some rock, there's some good backbeat stuff. I think Steve Vai would be considered fusion, but 70s fusion is really fantastic.
Yeah.
Uh,
Maybe Carlos Santana would fit into that category a little bit.
he's done a lot of stuff. He's a very, very good guitar player. Yeah.
Anyway, so we should probably jump into the topic now.
Yeah. Well, I always make sure that, if I'm going to talk to somebody about these issues that are very important and can actually, generate more heat than light, I actually make sure that I have a relationship with that person and that I like the person, because I don't want to confuse the argument for the person. So we've been dialoguing for the last couple months off and on,
Yeah.
so I finally got to the point where knew each other well enough to kind of jump into this deep water.
So,
So
I'm an atheist, by which I mean I don't believe there's any reasons to believe in the existence of God. Could you tell me what reasons you believe there are for belief in God? And I'd like to tell you my position on those reasons, and then I'd like to hear your thoughts on my position.
sure. I think all of reality necessitates an explanation. And I think when we really look at what is, the only grounding and explanation for that must be, and I know you will disagree with this, but it must be found in this omni-great God. Now, I probably use those terms more in their historical context, and I won't reference these kinds of terms in respect to the way some of the analytic philosophers and Plantinga and William Lane Craig, when they talk about God, they kind of bring God down to another level of being, but just a little bit greater than man, or as they say, maximally great. But they explain God as a kind of being that is on our level, just elevated to the highest conceivable level. But classical theism speaks of God as the very ground of being, and he is actually beyond our ability to describe him in what they call a univocal manner, in the sense of language. Language does not signify and refer to God in a one-to-one correlation, in the sense if I would use the word good or love or being, And this is where the Thomistic idea of the analogy of being is important. And of course, it goes back to the Aristotelian idea of act potency, that being, why is being different and why is there multiplicity? Well, it's because of different kinds of beings. And when you go back to the argument back with Parmenides and the pre-Socratic philosophers, Parmenides was really the father of pantheism. Heraclitus was really, all thing is becoming. Parmenides, all is being. And so you've got the pantheistic side philosophically of the notion of being within Parmenides, and then with Heraclitus and these what we call the fathers of existentialism in a certain sense, he would argue that all thing is becoming. But the synthesis that Aristotle and Plato worked on, they call this, the Parmenian dilemma, whether it's being or becoming. Plato grabbed one side of the dilemma. Aristotle grabbed the other side of the dilemma. But it took Thomas Aquinas to look at the issue and say, no, there are different kinds of beings, and they don't differ by, the void or differ by nothing, as, the later philosophers would speak about, and as they vetted out all of these issues. But being differs in the kind of being it is, in its relationship to potency and act, how much a being is in act or in potency. So there are just different kinds of being out there, necessitating the beginning of all being found in this one who is pure act, pure form, simple. He is not composite. And at this point, I use the male pronouns since, I am a Christian and I'm used to speaking of God as that male gender, although he's not male or female. But this one who started it must be without composition, without limits, without parts. And so my reason for believing in God is very philosophical. When we get into evidence, I do see a lot of the criticisms that my atheist friends bring up, in the sense of, if you bring up an intelligent designer, all you've really come to is really Plato's demiurge. There could be, even as you have said, how do we know there's not someone that created the God that created the world and the universe? And, that was really the whole Neoplatonic idea of this, the fullness, and then the one, and then the emanating out of all different kinds of being, and, the Logos being the first step in that emanation of being, all the way down to Sophia. And then Sophia was the creator of this demiurge, or demiurgos, who was really the world former, because in the Neoplatonic scheme, that matter is evil, and so the pureness of being in the Neoplatonic scheme, can't come close to matter, because matter is therefore evil. And so even Neoplatonic scheme, there's room for these other gods there. But anyway, I just say that to say that I do get the point that when you're arguing some of these arguments for God, you're not totally proving, this one that I'm speaking of, which needs to be dealt with in a philosophical manner. Although we look at created being, and then we work ourselves backwards to what must be the cause of that being. But especially the intelligent design stuff, that stuff is just getting us back to a world former. And, so I see the criticisms on that. I think in a week or so, I'm going to be on the Magic Sandwich Show with Drag and the others, and I think we're going to be talking about the Kalam cosmological argument. And I am not a fan of the Kalam argument either for particular reasons, but I'm not here. We're not here to talk about that one, because if I tell you everything I know on that one, then I won't have anything to say next week.
Okay, so the first thing you said that was I wanted to ask you about was you mentioned that Alvin Plantinga and William Lane Craig describe God in a slightly like a humanistic kind of a way. They're just a better human in some way, but you describe him differently. Would you, like Craig and Plantinga, say that God can't do logical contradictions? Like he can't create a rock that he can't lift or whatever, or he can't create a square circle. I mean, would you disagree with those, or you have a different position on those? Like how would you describe the difference between how Craig and Plantinga describe God and how you do?
Well, Craig and Plantinga, they're what you would call, let's see, there's a few different terms used, personalist, and my mind is going blank at this point on what it's called, but there's actually a division within theology these days. You have the extreme in the area of those that are process theologians, and they want to speak about panentheism, where the world is God's body, and then of course that is opposed to regular pantheism, and so there's this notion today to try to bring God down to and there's a reason why they use the non-Anselmian terms as far as the greatest conceivable being. If you notice, the terms are changed. It's the maximally great, and I think there's a reason for that, because they are pulling God down to the level of being that is just like the created order. So they don't have a real distinction between creation and creator, and so that leads them to speak about God as if words could refer to him in a univocal manner. So this is the area of God talk. How do our words relate to God? And Craig and Plantinga would hold to what they call univocal predication, the idea that our words are univocally referring to God as he truly is. So when we talk about goodness, we're ascribing to God goodness on the realm of the human level. And so that's why I talk about the fact that they're bringing God down to the human level, or as a superhuman. Like when I say God is being, I'm speaking of God as the very ground of being, if you will, capital B, capital E, capital I, capital and G, where I speak of human being and other existence as lowercase being. And I think that that's an important distinction. It's as important as the distinction with God capital G or God lowercase. But to get to your question, I'm sorry, I like to fly the plane and circle the runway for a while before I set down. But I would agree that God does not do anything that is absurd. And so when you get into those kinds of logical things, being that logic is of God, I would say that when we are thinking logically, we're thinking God's thoughts after him. So there's no way that God can violate logic, but that doesn't mean that there are just some things that we can't comprehend. And there may be some genuine paradoxes, which we have in modern science, particle wave duality, things like that. We have a lot of these paradoxical issues that they're not contradictions, they're just paradoxical. So I would agree with Craig and Plantinga on the issue of God cannot make a rock bigger than he can pick up. But interestingly enough, I think it was Descartes, and this term is called universal possibilism, that God really could create a square circle. But that's just absolute absurdity.
Okay. So I agree with what your main premise in your argument was, that there has to be, all reality needs an explanation. But I mean, I would make a distinction, because I would say that there is some necessary thing, but that thing is itself in reality. So are you saying that God itself is outside of reality?
Oh no, he is the creator of reality, but it's the idea that he is both transcendent and immanent. So deism would speak of God as being all transcendent. Pantheism would speak of God being all immanent, immanent with a I.
What do you mean by
that
immanent?
He's close, immanent, not eminent, but immanent. That God is close to his creation. He's related to his creation. He is not, the Deus absconditus. He is not an absentee God. He is involved in his world. And in a metaphysical sense, he is so close to the area of being and becoming that he is actually sustaining being for all creation moment by moment. He's in causal contact with every essence and being out there, actually giving them existence moment by moment, because existence, there's no law of existential inertia. Just because something comes to be doesn't mean that it's going to sustain that being, continually being in the motion of being and existence. But
And your position is both. He is both immanent and
transcendent.
okay. And so
Yeah,
just
that's the classical Christian position.
okay.
Yeah.
So my main argument would be that I agree that reality, or the contingent part of reality, needs a necessary cause, but that necessary cause doesn't need to be a conscious personal being of any kind. It can just be an eternal, all-powerful, natural thing with no mind of any kind.
Right. Yeah, I've heard you say that before, where you think that what do you call it? Naturalistic pantheism, if what you speak of. Yeah, I think there's lots of problems with your position, and if I can just speak from the position of your take on what grounds it, in the sense that there doesn't have to be a mind, and God could be naturalistic. And I think I've heard you vet this stuff out in the sense of explaining what you mean, but I might ask you to clarify some things as we go. But when we look at what grounds reality, I think there are some common sense things that we can point to. And as we look at reality, what is, I think there are some questions that we can ask about reality and deduce the nature of the cause by virtue of what has been made. This is called the way of remotion. We're working ourselves backwards. It's it's truly a posteriori. It's looking at the effect and then going back to the cause from that effect. An a priori manner would be to start off with God. And the ontological argument, for example, is an a priori argument. The cosmological arguments and moral argument, which I don't care too much for the moral argument either. But when we look at those, what we're doing with cosmological type arguments is we're looking at the effect, and we're trying to reason back to what must the ground of all reality be like. And I think this seems to be a simple response, but I think it is irrational to think that rationality can be produced from that which is non-rational. No mind, for example, but yet producing minds. I think there's a real problem with that, in the sense that a cause can only give what it has, and the effect cannot have something emergent that the cause doesn't have. So when we're talking about causation, and there's ways to speak of this, is, that I don't have to have a black eye in order to give somebody a black eye. But I do have the power to give a black eye if I was to hit somebody in the head with a golf club like my son did to me when he was little. So he didn't have to have a gash in his head in order to give me one. So we speak about having the power, or having that principle that produces in the effect. So what's in the cause produced in the effect. I like to use my hands when I start thinking. But you have to have it either virtually, imminently, and I forget the other fancy word for it, but or formally, yeah. Virtually, imminently, or formally. You have to have in the cause what is produced in the effect. And we also know that effects cannot be greater than their causes as well. And so, we could go off and talk about the nature of causation.
Well, yeah,
we could go all kinds of different different
let's
ways.
start there.
But
So the first thing would be that rationality doesn't exist. Rationality and math are languages that we use to describe reality. Reality exists, and rationality and math are just languages we use to describe it. So reality didn't have rationality. It didn't produce rationality. Rationality is just languages. Reality doesn't have English either. English is just an emergent property of our brains, just like suns are an emergent property of matter. Matter doesn't have the property of sun, but if you add enough matter together, you get a sun. So I'm pretty sure that would be the imminent version of one of the three things you proposed. But we can produce rationality just like we can produce English. It's just a language of a product of a mind to describe reality. And so that can be explained purely naturalistically. Yeah. So there's no need for there being a transcendent mind for that.
I would have to strongly disagree with that, because what you're explaining, when we deal with logic, there is something really in the very nature of reality that shows us that, say, the law of non-contradiction or the law of identity, those aren't mere constructions of our I don't even know how to formulate it, because those are products of which our brains, we must obey those things. It's descriptive and prescriptive in a certain sense, that reality is endued with the principle of identity and the principle of non-contradiction.
Well, sure, but that's the same thing as any language statement. Like if I say, there is a tree in my backyard, that statement is true because it corresponds to reality. So the law of identity, A equals A, is true because it corresponds to reality. We can make up a different law that's just A equals kumquat or something, and it wouldn't correspond to reality. It would be false. So we can make up new laws of logic and new logics, and there are many of them. And the only reason that the law of identity corresponds, or the law of identity is not just a part of our brains and is a part of reality, is because it describes reality, just like the statement, there is a tree in my backyard, also describes reality. I mean, I could say there is not a tree in my backyard, and those are equally sentences, but only one is true. And so likewise, I can say the law of identity, A equals A, or the law of the kumquat, where A equals kumquat or something. Only one of those corresponds to reality. So in both cases, the rationality is just like the English. It's just the language that we're using, and we're proposing different propositions in those languages, and only one of them actually corresponds to reality. And so what makes rationality special is that we just have a list of all the ones that we know or have good reason to believe correspond to reality, and we accept those as true as opposed to the ones that don't correspond to reality. And that's the only reason we say that rationality and math are things that are outside of our mind, because we have a list of the ones that correspond to reality and we exclude the ones that don't.
Yeah, I get what you're saying, but there's I think the blurring of some things that need to be distinguished in that. We're talking about our language, and we're just giving off sound, and the sounds that we have chosen amongst ourselves as humans we say that it's going to refer. So my signification is going to have a referent. And so we can call it A is A, or B is B, or goobity goop is goobity goop, whatever. But there is still a metaphysical ground to that proposition that makes it true. And that means that there is an existence, we could call it a virtual existence, of the laws of logic, where they permeate all of reality, and it's not an emergent property of reality, but it had to have a ground itself, an ontological ground. So that would be my comeback to that.
Well, it sort of, but not exactly. Like if I said there is a tree in my backyard, that has an ontological ground in reality because there is actually a tree in my backyard. But that ground doesn't come from the sentence. The sentence doesn't provide the ground.
It does, yeah.
But the same thing applies to logic. So when I say A equals A, the ontological ground for A equals A isn't the sentence. It's not the logic. It's not the rationality. The ontological ground for that is that reality works in that way.
Right, but there is that logic endued in reality. It's a part of the very essence of reality. Those principles are there. Do you get what I'm saying?
Well, I think you're saying something like that rationality exists as a thing. It has an ontology of its own as a part of reality. And that's the part which I'm pretty sure is false, and that's agreed upon to be false by most philosophers. Because if you just go to Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy for classical logic, there's section 6 goes into the question, the right logic ? There's different kinds of logic. You have standard logic and intuitionistic logic and many-valued logic and quantum logic, and they can all describe reality in different ways with different kinds of truth values, and many of them reject the law of identity or non-contradiction or excluded middle, or interpret them in different ways, and they could all be right. There's not like the law of, or the standard logic is the one that is necessarily right. In fact, we know that standard logic has problems and doesn't work in all cases, which is why these other logics were invented. Like, for example, there's the Lewinsky-Skolem theorem, which is the fact that standard logic can't express denumerable infinites. So if standard logic is in fact a product of God's mind, well then God can't express denumerable infinites. But it's not that denumerable infinites are not a logical paradox. They just can't be expressed with standard logic because standard logic has problems. Same with God.
What is that called? The
Lewinsky-Skolem theorem. They're Swedish names. I'm probably pronouncing them completely wrong, but it's something like that. Lewinsky-Skolem. It's got the little dots above a couple of the letters, so I have no idea if I pronounced them right.
Right.
But
wouldn't you concede though that it either is the theorem or it's not the theorem? See, even those specialized cases in certain circumstances are still subject to the law of identity and non-contradiction, because either the theorem or it's not the theorem. You know what I'm saying?
Well, no, because there's different ways to interpret identity that are like on a spectrum. So it's not a true or false. It's a partially true or partially false kind of a thing. And you can reject excluded middle in that case and do all kinds of interesting logics like fuzzy logic and many-valued logic where they don't accept those laws. There are laws that do reject that, or there are logics that do reject those or interpret them in different ways, and they still explain reality. So they don't have the same kind of rule system that standard logic does. Now, I agree standard logic is the only one I use. I haven't even attempted to try and understand these other logics because they don't do anything practically for me. But there are other logics that do not use those three laws, and they work perfectly well. So you do not need those to describe reality.
But once again, pull yourself back one level from those, and they are subject to that theorem is either itself or it's not itself.
No, that's what I'm saying. That is false.
You know what I'm saying?
That statement is false. So no, they use a different logic completely. So that statement either is itself or is not itself is a false statement. That is just not correct. They use a different kind of a system to assess that. Now, I can't describe that system because I haven't studied these enough to try to, but it's like intuitionistic logic rejects that, or many-valued logic rejects that. They still interpret it. They still work perfectly consistently. There is no logical contradiction in them insofar as their own system, but it does not cohere to the standard logic that you're using. So you can.
I get that, but I'm saying pull yourself back one level. That the man who did that, he either did it or he didn't do it.
No,
He
I don't
either
think you're
theorized it or he didn't
understanding.
theorize.
It's like if I said there is a tree in my backyard, I could just use Japanese to say in if I knew
Right,
Japanese,
exactly.
but they're
Yeah,
both equally true. One is not more true than the other. It's not like saying it in English then supersedes the Japanese, or saying it in
right,
Japanese supersedes the English. They're both equally true statements. So these two logics are equally true. The law of identity does not supersede the standard logic, does not supersede the intuitionistic logic. It's just a different language. They are both equally true. So describing it and saying, well, if you step back a stage, well, no, you can't do that because the logic is the core of the system. So they're just using a different logic. They're both equally true. The standard logic description of it and the intuitionistic logic description of it are both languages that describe the case. You can't just say,
right.
well, that other logic can be described by my standard logic. It doesn't work that way.
No, no. What I'm saying though is that system, once you step out of that system, it's either that system or it's not that system. You see what I'm saying? There's still a fundamental.
I understand what you're trying to say,
Yeah.
but I'm saying that is false. That is demonstrably false. It does not work that way. That's not how logics work. So if
No,
you have two
but
logics,
if I'm outside of it, what I'm saying, I'm not in that system. But if I'm judging that from outside it, it's still subject to those basic principles by which
I understand what you're trying to say, but I don't
by.
think you're understanding my point. It's like
I might not be understanding.
If I'm
yeah.
using English,
Yeah.
I can say anybody in Japanese can use. I'm trying to think of a Japanese word. I know some Japanese words, but like if someone uses the Japanese word for tree to describe a tree, and I say, well, no. See, the word for that is a tree. It's English. It's tree.
Sure.
I'm not correcting them. I'm not superseding their language. I'm just trying to say that my language is better than their language, which it's not. They're both language are exactly the same, exactly equal, exactly have the same level of truth or correspondence to reality. There is no greater there. So all you're doing is using your own language to describe their logic. It doesn't supersede it. It doesn't change their logic. Your logic doesn't apply to theirs. They still get to use their logic without yours. It works perfectly fine independent of yours, even if you can use yours to describe theirs by like saying, well, either it is itself or it is not itself. All you're doing is just using your language to describe that system, but it doesn't apply.
Okay. I get your point. I have to look into that because that sounds really complicated.
Well, there's a couple of examples I wanted to.
I guess I probably should just consider myself ignorant of these points and stop for a second and go back and check them out and try to understand exactly what you're saying. But go ahead and make the points you were going to make, because I want to write this stuff down so I can learn.
Oh yeah, absolutely. The Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy is where I'm getting most of this. So they go through the list of section 6 is the right logic ? That's the section that it's on.
Okay.
And they go through the problems
That's
of the
name
logic.
The right logic.
Yeah, the right logic ? is that's the name of the section 6. And they go through the 3 big problems. One is the Lewinski's-Coulomb theorem, which I probably pronouncing not even close. And the other ones are Gödel's incompleteness theorem 1 and Gödel's incompleteness theorem 2. So standard logic, Gödel's incompleteness theorem 1 is that there are certain unresolvable statements in standard logic. And Gödel's incompleteness theorem 2 is that no matter how good your system of logic is, it can never be shown to be internally consistent without reference to an external logic. So those are the 3 big problems with standard logic, things it can't solve, problems it can't solve. And the other versions of logic have been invented to try and address those kinds of problems.
Okay, let me ask you this question here. See if I can trying to do 2 things at the same time here. Dang it, man! I think I forgot what I was going to ask you. Go ahead and go on, and then if I can remember, I'll jump out again.
Oh yeah, so
sorry.
So my main point was just that logic isn't a function of the universe. Logic is a language created by humans, and there's lots of different logics that have been created by humans to describe the way reality works. One of which is standard logic, and it works to describe reality, and the others describe reality differently, but they all work equally well to describe everything we see around us. Kind of like the interpretations of quantum mechanics. You have the pilot wave theory and the many worlds theory and the quantum consciousness collapse theory. They all describe the exact same phenomenon, and none of them supersede the other. They all do the same thing. And all of the theories of logic or the definitions of logic all do the same thing. They're just formal languages that humans have invented to describe the reality we experience. But there isn't one that's
it sounds like.
Go
Oh,
ahead.
go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, no,
Oh,
go
I
ahead.
was saying, it sounds like you're really just iterating nominalism, where you give me the name of something, but there is no there's nothing more there than the name. There's no actually real referent that the name is actually describing.
I wouldn't
It's not.
say that, because when I
No.
say, like,
Okay.
in my example of the language, like if I say if there's a tree in my backyard, there is actually a tree there,
Yeah.
but the language and the tree are the separate things. It's like the
Right.
confusing the map for the territory. Like, you seem to be saying that the logic itself is the tree, and I'm
No.
saying,
No. No. That's not what I'm saying. Yeah.
well, I mean,
No.
that's like when you say that
Yeah.
rationality is a thing in the universe. It has like its own ontology as a part of the universe. That would be the way I see that is like claiming that rationality is the tree. And I'm saying, no, no, no,
Okay.
rationality isn't a tree. It doesn't have an ontology. Rationality is the language we use to describe the tree. So I think that one of these logics is right. It does accurately describe the way reality works. And the other ones are wrong. So they can't all be um, perfectly consistent in that way. One of them is right and the other ones aren't right. But we
Okay.
don't know which
Okay.
one. And the logic itself isn't in reality. It's just describing reality.
Okay. I totally agree with you there. But what I'm saying, though, is that there's a reason why the very nature of reality conforms to what we are describing in our words. So it's the difference between the message and the communication of the message. That's it's a very subtle distinction, but I think it's an important one. You know, there is an immaterial truth behind the description of that truth, that there are real essences out there. So when you say that there is a tree in the backyard, there is a real essence of tree instantiated there as a form coming together with matter, that it's a real thing. And your description of it is one thing, but it is corresponding to something that is actually real. And that's why you can change what you call it here and this has to do with the issues of the way something is signified and what is signified. So what we're signifying with our language, nominalism would say that there is nothing else but that language that we're using, you know, nominal from name. But I'm suggesting that there is something real in the world that makes the world function and obey these things that are discernible to us. So when you say tree, which is just, you know, simply formulation of sounds that are coming from your vocal cords, that's one aspect. But there is a real tree out there that
Yeah,
exists.
I agree.
That,
So I think that,
yeah,
well, it's
we
some
might
and
be
some.
talking past each other in a
Well, so
certain
I
sense.
agree that there is a reality. Reality actually exists. It's not just the language we use. Like if I say the sun exists, there is actually a sun there. But there are
Right.
some things that we've just made up words to say things exist, but they don't actually exist. Like unicorns, there's not actually,
Sure.
it seems to refer to something, but it doesn't actually refer to anything. So in the
Yeah.
case of
Right.
rationality is one of those things like a unicorn. It doesn't exist in the universe independent of our minds. It's just a language in our minds that we use to describe things in the universe. Like,
Okay. I get. Yeah, I get what you're saying there. Yeah. Yeah, I understand that. So I think there's an important point that's buried down in my metaphysics that I'm assuming that you're not aware of what I'm assuming. So, and I think that it can't be vetted out here. But when, for example, when you say unicorn, that is an actual thing that can be defined abstract. It's conceptually. It's a concept. And concepts are what we call essences. And in order for an essence to stand out of nothingness into existence, it takes an act of being. That essence and existence are distinct within reality. So you can have essences. It's related to Plato's forms, but it's more Aristotelian. I'm not saying that there's an essence of treeness out there that a tree participates in when we see that tree. It's more Aristotelian, that there is a true essence of a tree, but it only exists in that particular instantiation. There is no great existing archetypal tree out there in the world of forms and ideas that is existing. So, but essences and concepts are the products of minds, and God could have created a unicorn. He just didn't do it. But when we write stories and things like that, I think I put a point in my book, there is a concept out there and an essence called Darth Vader. But he doesn't exist. What? He has a virtual existence, but there's never he's never been given an actual existence. So there is a potency out there called Darth Vader that has been created by human minds and has a virtual existence via the movies and things like that. So that is, in a certain sense, a something, although it's not instantiated in reality. So we're getting into areas now where I'm still a novelist in. So
well, let's talk about that a little bit. So, like, when we talk about the idea of Darth Vader, the idea in our head can never exist. It has no potency or potentiality. It's just an idea, and it would only, if there was like an actual Darth Vader, those two things, the idea of Darth Vader and the actual Darth Vader, would have no real correlation. They have no connection at all. They're completely separate things, because the ideas in our head, like when we try to imagine even a tree, the idea in our head comes nowhere near to what a tree actually is. So when we imagine something and say it has a potentiality, well, that's kind of false, because there's no way that the thing in our head can actually exist in reality, because the thing in our head is fundamentally flawed. We can never actually like really imagine something as it is in reality. That's not even possible. So the idea of it and the thing in of itself are always going to be separate things. So there's never going to be a potentiality that an idea in our head can come into reality. Those are contradictory ontologies.
I think I'm understanding what you're saying there. And there's a couple of ways I was thinking that how to respond. But when we talk, and this relates to really how I started everything off, there has to be a ground, and this one has to be one and simple, no composition, no parts. When we get to this area of abstract things, concepts, and then concrete things that we're describing that actually, the major point is that one exists and one doesn't. I get that. What can make that thing exist? It needs what we call an actus essendi. It needs an act of being. And at this point, that's only something God can do. Humans cannot take our concepts and truly give them an act of being. We can give them a virtual existence, And in a certain sense, the Darth Vader that you're thinking of is just like the Darth Vader I'm thinking of, because we have, with the act of our mind, the first act of the mind, as they say, is apprehension. You grab onto that concept. Then the mind puts subject and predicate together, making a judgment. Now you have a truth. So the first act of the mind in apprehension is to grab onto that form that's there. And there is that form of Vader that is in your head and is in my head. Now, because it's the product of, George Lucas, he had no real power to give it actual existence. He could give it virtual existence by writing the story. God is the only one that can take an essence and give it the act of existence. So when you're thinking of a tree and I'm thinking of a tree, the apprehension in our minds are identical. So our mind has been able to reach out in a way and grab the essence of that tree, and we can understand it, and we know what it is. And this is why the issue of the distinction of essence and existence is so important when we talk about created being, and then we talk about the creator. Existent beings have all kinds of composition. We have substance accident, we have matter form, and maybe I should try to illustrate from the level of substance accident, like tallness. Tallness is like a concept, and it can only exist in a substance because it's an accident. Accidents only exist in a substance. And that's the only way that they can have existence, is by virtue of existing in a individual, a substance, a being. So now that I've confused myself and everybody else, when we look at these things in the created order, there seems to be a true essence that my brain is grabbing onto. And when I talk about a tree or a car, and there is a real reality that those essences are obeying the properties and principles of what they are. And so now I've forgotten my point, but it just goes back to essence and existence is distinct. God must put that together. Anything that is composite has a maker. So when we look at reality, because everything is composed, and the ultimate metaphysical bringing together is essence and existence, that's why I say there's evidence for God in the way that reality is.
From my perspective, I don't see any contradiction to say that all of reality could be explained or created by essentially a quantum particle we haven't discovered yet. I don't see why there would need to be a God or a mind in any way to explain what you call the essence existence distinction. Like, I think that I don't think there is such a distinction, but that's a different topic. I think there's no contradiction in saying that all of reality is the result of a natural, like essentially quantum particle that can exist outside of space-time. I don't see why it couldn't collapse in the same kind of a way outside of space and time, that essentially the way a God would choose to create, or how you put it, bridge the essence existence gap.
Right. Yeah, cause it to stand up out of nothingness is another way of putting it, which is really what the word existence means, to stand up. I think there is a world of difference in a being who has the power to bring into existence the universe, or trying to ground the universe in some sort of thing that is composed itself. There has to be the grounding of composite being, and that being cannot be composed itself. And
Okay,
this was
but
the point.
a quantum particle, like a singularity, could also be a single entity. It doesn't need itself to be a composite either.
If it exists in space and exists in time, then it's going to be composed.
Right, but I said like a minute ago that quantum particles can exist outside of space and time.
But aren't you describing nothing at that point? I'm not getting how
No,
a quantum particle.
there's a bunch of different theories. It's called emergent spacetime. It's one of the prominent theories in
Right.
physics right now, where spacetime emerged from more fundamental natural properties, and those properties exist independent of space and time. So one theory is the amplituhedron by Nima Arkani-Hammad, and another one is Sean Carroll's version. I don't remember what he specifically calls his. It's just emergent spacetime. So there's quantum particles that can exist in these theories, at least outside of space and time completely. So they don't have those kinds of properties that you're describing.
Well, it would still have an essence of existence distinction. It would still be a distinction from what it is and that it is.
Wait, how so? So, because I could say the same thing about God. Well, God would have a distinction between his essence and existence. And you would just say, well, no, that's not the case. Why can't I just say the same thing about this quantum particle?
Well, see, and that's the important point. That's what simplicity is that God does not have a distinction from what he is and that he is. And to ever get any kind of composition of what a thing is and that a thing is, it has to start in a simple being.
Oh, right. But just like you can assert that God is perfectly simple, I can assert that the quantum particle is perfectly simple. What's the difference? Why would it be more or less plausible that one or the other is actually the correct definition of perfect simplicity?
Well, because what you've done now is you've taken my concept of God and called it a particle.
Well, no, because I'm saying that my definition of perfect simplicity entails just the particle. There's no consciousness. There's no omnibenevolence. Those in my definition are extravagant things that have nothing to do with perfect simplicity. I'm going to reject those as what simplicity is and say that what simplicity actually is the particle, the quantum particle as described in physics. That's what perfect simplicity really is.
Well, that would be outside what is necessary in a simple being. It can't be that something that is composed, that particle would still have matter and form. It would still have that distinction. It would have.
I don't think so. I don't think, because I think it's kind of like it exists in like Hilbert space, so it doesn't actually have matter and form in that way either. So, I mean, I would say that when you think about the Christian God, the classical Christian God, you think of what we describe as omnipotent, omnibenevolent, omniscient, eternal in some sense, personal, conscious. Those words are the words we use to describe the Christian God. And it seems like those could in fact be separate properties. And it seems like many of those properties are unnecessary. The only ones we really need to describe perfect simplicity is just eternal, all-powerful. And that's it. Like if we have just those two, we can explain everything. And the rest of those seem to be extravagant principles of a God. So he seems to be more of a composite than a perfectly simple thing. And when you claim that my description of the quantum particle is extravagant and has extra properties that aren't necessary, well, I think that it's actually simpler than or less extravagant than the theistic definition. Those properties seem to be really unnecessary. Like adding all of these extra infinites in seems to be not necessary to explain the universe. We can just do it with those two properties or those one properties of eternal, all powerful.
Once you start saying that, though, you're no longer explaining a simple being, because you're adding on to these properties as if they are accidental properties.
Well, I'm taking them away. So I'm taking essentially the 6 words we use to describe God. I'm removing 4 of them. So I can't be adding anything there.
Well, you can't take them away because they're not there. He's simple. So when we're talking about his essence, and we're talking about these omnis that you're describing, they are not separate components of God. It is speak about God in re, or I should say in ratio, in reason. They're logical distinctions, but they're not distinctions in reality. It's only looking at God from a particular perspective. So when we talk about God, that his essence is his existence, that also carries with it the connotation that his power is his knowing, and his knowing is his power.
Right. So
And,
from my
and,
perspective,
and remember, we're talking about words that are analogically applied to God, not univocally.
right. So from my perspective, I'm going to take that exact same argument, everything you just said, and apply it to the quantum particle. I'm going to say that, well, no, when you say that there's a distinction between the matter and the form of the quantum particle, well, no, that's just your interpretation. You're just applying these words. Well, really, the quantum particle is simplicity, and it's just the eternal all powerful. Everything else isn't there. So and the description you give to a God, even though you claim it's perfect simplicity, it's not. It's just a bunch of extravagant particles that you've placed together and called perfect simplicity. So from my perspective, we can just take anything we want, like the spaghetti monster or whatever, and call it perfect simplicity and say, well, when we call something spaghetti and flying, well, those aren't actually extravagant particles we've added on. That's just entailed in its nature. And we can seem to make that same argument that you're making for anything we want. But when we actually look at what it takes to construct a reality, all it takes is energy. And that's it. It has to exist and have energy. So just eternal and all powerful seem to be the only necessary traits to create reality. You don't need all of the other things that God supposedly has and that are supposedly entailed in all of the other properties. They seem to be just extravagant additions that are unnecessary, far more so than those in the quantum particle or even the spaghetti monster.
So what are you saying that we need to have reality? What were you saying?
Eternal and
we
all
need energy
powerful.
and what?
Just eternal and all powerful.
Okay, eternal and all powerful. So you're saying that what must ground the composed reality must be composed itself.
Well, no, because eternal and all powerful could be like, I'm granting those are essentially the same kind of a thing in the simplicity definition you're using.
See, because in my estimation, all you're doing is taking my definition of God and calling it a particle.
Well, again, so I'm taking out the consciousness. It has no consciousness. It has no personality. It has no goodness. It's just eternal and all powerful.
Okay. It's still a being that is a part of what we know in this universe, right? It's matter, it's form, it's in space, it's in time.
No, it's none of those things.
Seems like you're describing a part of the universe, but then saying no, it's outside of the universe, and putting divine attributes on it, but calling it something else.
It's definitely outside of the universe. So we know our universe had a beginning, and whatever came before that is outside of our universe. And that thing is not a part of our universe. It created our universe. So this quantum particle isn't a part of our universe. I'm just using the word particle to make, as you said, an analogous kind of usage of language. So this definitely exists outside of our universe, and it has some of the necessary properties as you would describe them. It's just eternal, all powerful. No consciousness, no mind, no goodness, no personhood, personalness. It's just energy, essentially. It just has the properties of energy, and that's all it needs. And it seems like we can explain everything in the universe with just that. We don't need all of these other analogical properties that you ascribe to a God.
Okay, so you got that thing then. What is moving it? What is causing it to take different forms? Because you still are in need of a composer, a mover, one that is pure act, that is actualizing the potency of this energy to become the universe.
Well, it's a quantum particle, so it can do that all on its own, just as a part of its nature. It doesn't actually move, though. It's unchanging. But as a part of its nature, it can cause the collapse of the singularity that we see in the Big Bang. But it's a separate thing, but it can interact with it in that sense.
Okay, so what is this thing that's collapsing?
Uh,
what is it? Because once again, it's
well, that would be the singularity of our universe. That would be a part of our universe, the thing that collapses in our universe.
okay. So you're saying this quantum particle causes the collapse,
Yes.
and you don't see the inherent problem in suggesting that a particle caused the universe?
No, I don't see.
A
I'm not.
a
What do you mean?
universe a universe with a multiplicity of form, a universe that has characteristics of mind, of all of these qualities that must necessarily be in the ground of the universe. The perfections of creation are in the creator
Oh, right, right. I agree with
in an
that. So,
analogical sense.
so I would say that the particle is just matter, energy stuff, and so all of the stuff in the universe is also energy. So it doesn't actually add anything to the universe. The all of the stuff we see, like morality and purpose and meaning and rationality, all of those things are emergent properties of minds that are also products of energy. So it doesn't add any new extravagant properties outside of itself. It's just energy, and it causes more energy. That's it.
So it's causing things that it doesn't have itself.
No, no, no.
Is that what
It
you're
only
saying?
it's energy, and all it does is cause energy, and that's it. But all of the other
Okay.
things are just emergent properties of energy.
Okay. So are you taking a reductionistic view of reality, saying that reality is nothing but energy,
Yes, that would be
and
essentially.
whatever properties we're seeing are just simply emerging out of the energy that is at the very core of reality?
Yes.
That we say there's still a problem with what is the source of the various forms within reality. What is causing that thing, or whatever, the quantum particle that is collapsing? What see this is, I know we're actually over time at this point, but we might have to continue this on at another time. But I think this is another important thing to talk about as well for us to vet out. Is there's a different kind of creation that seem to be stuck together. For example, me as an individual, I'm composed of parts, and those parts will exist even when I'm gone. So within the universe, we constantly see motion of coming to be and passing away. So we have generation and corruption. But the matter itself, the energy, what you're suggesting, is continual throughout the history of the universe. So that is one kind of creation that's going on in our universe.
And why is that a problem? Because like we
Oh
can
no, I'm
see.
not saying there's a. Oh, I'm just in the middle of what I'm saying. And then of course there's the aspect of the creation out of nothing, which would be the energy itself from my Christian perspective. So the stepping out of nothingness for the energy is necessary from a creation point of view. But once that energy is there, once that ex nihilo creation takes place, there is still the necessity of the composing of matter and form and all of these essences that we see within the universe. There must be a cause of coming to be, that change, that potency, that act potency, that actualizing of the form coming in connection with the matter and making, for example, a statue. There's still a need for a composing once you get this pure energy.
Well, why can't that just be explained by interactions in the energy? Like, for example, if we look at crystals forming on a rock, the crystals can form purely by the different interactions of the already existing matter. So it's not like we need some additional explanation beyond the protons and neutrons to explain the crystal is just a result of the interactions of the protons and neutrons. And in the same way, we can have the energy result in the form. So like space and time is just energy. It's just a function of energy. And so the fact that we have composites as in forms is just a result of energy. It's just a form of energy. It's not like a separate kind of a thing.
Well, energy is matter, and form is distinct. You can't call energy matter form.
I don't.
I'm just talking about the basic E equals mc squared. You know, matter is energy. Energy is matter.
But so is space-time. Space-time is also energy. So
okay, yeah.
But space-time is what causes form, and so form is actually also energy.
No, space-time doesn't cause form. It would allow material forms to exist and to
I
be.
I would disagree with that. I would say that form is caused by space-time. I'd say that space-time is the source of form.
Okay, well, let me define form so that we're talking about the same thing. When I say form, let's say the sculpture of David by Michelangelo. The form of Davidness that was impressed on that lump of granite. Those forms, once again, are products of thinking, of mind. And I don't think you can get these essences as forms without mind. These are mental.
Well, I'm not following exactly what you mean by form here. So, I mean, like in the context of energy, like if energy produces brains and brains can produce the image of David, then we can form the image of David in a rock. But why is there a problem with going from energy to form? Like if we can get energy that can produce matter in space and time, then where is the problem with getting form? How is there that not, where's the issue there?
Form is distinct from matter and energy. Forms are essences. This is going to go back to Plato and Aristotle, the idea of matter form, hylomorphism, that there are, for example, this wood has taken the form of the house that I'm standing in. What caused it, the matter, to take this particular form? Well, you have to have a causal agent involved in bringing together the composition of matter and form.
I don't think I'm following.
That makes sense?
I don't. So, because from my perspective, so we have the quantum particle, and it is pure energy, and it can cause the singularity collapse to produce the energy in the universe, which includes space, time, matter, and energy. And so, with just those things, it seems like I can explain everything in the universe. I'm not sure like what it is you're saying, that what additional thing there is there, what you're calling the form that I can't, that is there that I need to explain that I haven't explained with just matter, energy.
Well, what is causing that matter to take particular form?
It's just a fold in energy. So it's like if we look at what causes a protein to produce DNA, well, it's a fold in the protein. So the matter and form and space and time are all just folds of energy. They're just different configurations of energy.
Yeah, I think we're both not understanding each other at this point, because I'm in a total Aristotelian, Thomistic, worldview mindset at this point. When I say form, I mean essences. Those things that are causing the matter to take a particular form and come to be. I'm not talking about an ex nihilo creation here. I'm talking about if you've got all these particles out there, where are these essences coming from? These true, that our minds understand as concepts. Where are these varying forms coming from that we see in the created order?
Could you give me an example of a form
Okay, let me see. I've got a bunch of cookie dough laid out flat. And I take the mold of a tree and I give that cookie dough that form now of treeness. I've now instantiated the form of this Christmas tree onto that matter. It has to come from outside of matter. It can't come from within that matter to bring about that treeness to pop up into existence out of that matter. Matter is just a material to work with.
Okay, so the way I would explain that is that matter and energy build the brain, and the brain takes an image of the tree, processes it through the visual cortex, creates the outline of the tree, and then we reverse engineer that outline and prescribe it onto a medium. But all of that is physical. All of that is just matter and energy doing that. It takes the tree, which is matter and energy, and then interprets the light, which is matter and energy, and then creates an outline of the light in the visual cortex, which is matter and energy. And then it reflects that visual cortex and puts it into a medium like clay, which is also matter and energy. So it seems like all of that in that statement can still be described just by matter and energy in space and time.
Okay, let me change illustrations, and then we'll have
actually,
to.
Yeah, we need to wrap up pretty soon because.
Yeah, because you're still trying to reduce everything down to this matter energy thing, which seems to be what you were doing with my definition of God as well. If that's kind of reducing it down to, it doesn't need the Christian conception of God, all it needs is this, and so this bare minimum is what actually gives rise to everything else. I think I understand what you're saying. So let's talk about how that reductionism falls apart in another area. And I think it's going to fall apart in reference to the universe as well. But let's consider, let's see, the Attitude Song, okay, Steve Vai. If you look at that music, that is a concept, a composition. It was produced by Vai's mind. Now, when you try to explain that down and just say, well, that music is just an emergent property of the vibrations and the atmosphere, and while all that might be true, there is still something missing in your explanation. And that is that form that music is taking by the artist who is now creating it. And I think that's what is being missed in trying to reduce everything down to just, energy, which I still think is in composition, because it just can't exist in no space, no time, no nothing. But we can talk about that later. But you're losing a tremendous amount of what music is even all about when you try to explain it in just its material, the matter, the physics of the Attitude Song. The Attitude Song is a fantastic song that communicates to us human beings in a way that we can't even put our finger on. The concept of beauty and aesthetics and all this other stuff. And I'm not trying to use all that as an argument for God. I'm just saying that reducing everything down just to energy, as you could the Attitude Song, you're not describing what it took to bring the Attitude Song into existence. You've missed the entire point of it. So that's another illustration that I could use. Illustrations fall apart.
Yeah, I think
they're not all perfect.
I still don't think I'm following exactly how that's not explained by matter and energy. But I have to get to an appointment at in 15 minutes. So
I know, man. We went way over, but I was having fun.
Yeah, me too. So thanks again for coming on. I really enjoyed talking with you, and I'd love to talk with you again sometime.
Yeah, let's do it again real soon. I start my semester up in a couple weeks, so I start not only taking courses in the PhD program at Liberty University, but I'm also teaching now for Southeastern University. So maybe before the 15th or the 20th, maybe. I'll have to check my schedule,
Yeah,
but maybe
I'll
we
have
can
to
do it
check my
again
schedule and I'll get back to you because
in a
yeah,
week or so,
yeah, absolutely.
because the schedule is going to be crazy, as it was last semester too. But
Yep.
hey, man, I really appreciate chatting with you. I like the idea that we can not turn this into a bunch of heat, but we can actually have a gentlemanly conversation, and that's what I like to become friends with the people I dialogue with, because
Yeah,
it's
absolutely.
way more than these arguments. You're a fellow human being, and that means I care for you and want your well-being, your goodness, your even your success on YouTube. Even though I might disagree with your message, I want you to succeed. I don't want you to fail and things like that. So I just appreciate having these conversations like this.
Yeah,
So
me too. I totally
yeah,
agree.
thanks for being receptive to that, because not everybody is.
Yeah. All right.
They want
Well,
to
I
just
gotta
jump
run.
down.
I'm gonna like barely make it to my
Yeah.
appointment. So thanks again for coming
All right,
on.
man.
I'll talk to you later.
Okay.
See ya.
All right, man. Thanks.